Hello and welcome to another edition of the NBA Outlet presented by OTGBasketball.com. Be sure to follow OTG on Twitter at OTGBasketball. Also hit that subscribe button. I'm Nick Fay, your host. With me as always, Young Harris.
What's up, Nick? Exciting time of the year. Getting tired of all this rest talk. Shout out to the Warriors last night. Impressive win over the Rockets and got the Final Four this weekend, so a lot going on.
Yeah, a lot of basketball. The playoff race is pretty tight. Also, another big win last night was the Portland Trailblazers who beat the Nuggets. So that 8-seed race is getting pretty tight. And over in the Eastern Conference, we've had plenty of movement, especially we've had movement at the top. And the number 1 seeded Cavs moved down to number 2 seed right now after the Celtics took number 1. So this is something that we didn't necessarily think was going to happen. A lot of people said, the Cavs will turn it on. Don't really worry about the Celtics. And what do you know? The Celtics currently have that number 1 seed. What do you think about this? Does this say a lot about the Cavs, or do you think they don't really care as much, or is there real issues in Cleveland?
LeBron's been the 2 before. He's been the 2 seed and made the finals before, but I think there's some serious issues that, in my eyes, will be solved by the postseason. And that I heard Colin Cowherd. It's not one of my favorite guys in the world, but the point that he made today was that LeBron, although he's had a great regular season, is becoming a seasonal player. And not to say he hasn't shown up, but the level of intensity that I think will go on in that locker room with that organization, led by him, once April comes around, is going to go to another level. There is some level of concern. If I were to say 1 to 10 on the panic meter, it's still nothing over a 5, but it's something to look at. But I don't think I would be panicking if I'm a Cavs fan.
Well, I mean, I think if you're a Cavs fan, the intensity is going to turn up, but they can obviously turn it on, turn the switch like most teams can't. But they also are facing a higher level of competition in the Eastern Conference this year, I would say. At some point, they're probably going to have to face 2 of these 3 teams one time, and that's going to be either the Celtics, the Wizards, or the Raptors. So they're going to face probably one of them in the second round, and then the other team in the Eastern Conference final. So I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk like it's probably been in the past. Last year we kind of knew the Raptors weren't going to do anything. The year before that we knew the Hawks really weren't much. So I think there are some issues. I think the number 1 issue I would have is probably from a defensive perspective and from probably an athletic perspective. And even their coach Tyronn Lue came out I think it was this past week, and he said, the crazy part about it is we start off the right way, but teams are so much faster than us. They look much faster than we are. I mean, damn, it just looks like just beat us on the dribble, transition, just looking faster. So I think there is issues defensively, but obviously if you turn up the heat and intensity, and LeBron's going to be playing 100 times harder when it comes to the postseason, and probably a lot of these other veterans are too. But it's not like you want to get into bad defensive habits going into the postseason. You want to start to kind of get things to click for these last 10, 12 games right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's another way of Lue, I think, calling his team out and trying to challenge them. He's obviously a little frustrated, but at this point, I think that's him calling those guys out and trying to get the best out of that group going forward. And they've had some frustrating defeats. I know that Washington really outplayed them the other night. That was an NBA TV game, and the Wizards really had their way with them on the road. The Washington got that win. But Lue's trying to
do it. The Spurs put a beat down on them as well.
Yeah, and that's happened. The Spurs have had their way with Cleveland in the past. So I don't look at it as, like I said, I'm not ready to hit the panic button or put the red flag up or think that this is going to spiral out of control. It's a tough situation to be in at the moment, but I have to believe that they'll figure this thing out.
So what about the concerns of, like rim protection and rebounding are 2 issues I think they've struggled with this season. And if you look at the roster, you could see there's kind of holes in these areas. Do you think this is something they can fix schematically, or LeBron's just going to have to step up and take on a bigger load down low? What do you think is going to happen? How are they going to improve from the way they're playing with that portion?
The first thing I'll say is the Bogut injury was big. I think that actually has had an impact on them. I think he was going to provide exactly what you just spoke about, just a body to fill up some space down there. It's going to put a tremendous amount of pressure on Love. It's going to put a tremendous amount of pressure on Thompson. Channing Frye is going to have to play some extra minutes, but he's more of a perimeter player anyway. Yes, the responsibility is going to fall on LeBron's shoulders. And at this point, I don't think there's anything to do from a personnel standpoint, but that Bogut injury does loom large.
Yeah, I mean, when it happened, you really didn't think much about it because the Cavs were clicking. But now when you see some issues, some things are pointed out. But also from an athletic perspective, you look at this team and they're kind of an older bunch. They don't have a ton of super athletes on the team. Maybe in their time, some of them are great athletes, but now they're just, somewhat mediocre. And Tyronn Lue spoke about other teams being faster. Are you concerned about them athletically all in the playoffs, or just because the game slows down so much, it's not as big a concern in the postseason?
Yeah, not as big as a concern. I don't know. I think there's some decent athletes on this Cavs team. I mean, I think when they defensively tune it up and when they get everybody in order, it's not going to be as bad. But they are a veteran, led group, and most of these guys are upper 20s, low 30s, up into the mid 30s, and it could become an issue. But then again, like you just mentioned, the pace slowing down in the postseason, and other factors. Experience plays a major role in the postseason as well, and they have that. And they kind of understand the way the playoffs go.
Yeah, and I think, obviously they're not going to get quicker, faster, get any more players before the postseason. So I think schematically they might change some things up defensively. Tyronn Lue talked about, I think a week or two ago, that he has some things in mind that he's saving for the postseason, how they can fix these type of things. So keep an eye on that, I guess, about their defense. And like you said, they do have high basketball IQ type players, some guys who've been around for some time and they have playoff experience. So there's going to be some extra edge, and they might have the experience edge on a team like Washington or Boston, who hasn't really gone deep in the playoffs in some time.
For sure. And, it's still going to – how long has Love been back for? It's still –
Yeah, he still has to kind of find his rhythm. Yeah. I would say I'm probably with you. I'm not like super panicking, but I'd probably say I'm like more in a scale of 1 to 10. I'm probably getting on a 6, and I'm trending upwards if they don't fix their defensive issues, and the athletic standpoint is kind of worrisome just with some of the matchups they could have to deal with in the postseason.
Yeah, it's possible. Boston does look pretty darn good right now, and
Washington we know plays them hard. So.
Yeah.
And everyone kind of forgets about Toronto, but like we've mentioned is, Lowry comes back, they're definitely a different team with him. So it's not going to be an easy road to the finals. But I would still say
the hardest route that LeBron will probably have to face since he's been back in Cleveland.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But it's still at the end of the day, if we had to put money on it, I'm still picking the Cavs to make it out of the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I'm not ready to pick anybody else, but if you had to give me another team outside of them, I might lean towards Washington still over Boston. But the home court's going to play a major role, and it's if Boston could go into that series with those first 2 games at the Garden, TD Garden, then it could be obviously advantage them. But still, I like you said, I would lean towards the Cavs. But those teams are definitely going to give them a run for their money come May and early June.
Well, talking about the number 1 seed in the other conference, the Western Conference, the Golden State Warriors, they picked up their 60th win last night. So this is 3 straight years they had over 60 wins. First team to do it since the 95-98 Bulls. So, and 200 regular season wins for Steve Kerr. So I know you obviously enjoy watching the Warriors. You enjoy that type of play. You enjoy Steph Curry. What do you think about the success that Kerr has had? How much of that is Kerr? How much of that is the front office? Or how much of that is the players? Or is it just pretty much a combination of all 3 just being great?
It's a combination, but if I had to say, it's when the difference that I noticed was when Kerr came over here to Golden State. The way the offense ran was just dramatically different. I think there was just a lot more ball movement, a lot more player movement. He inherited what Mark Jackson built, and then I think just took it to another level. Obviously, it helps that guys are a couple years older, and just
And stayed healthy, especially Steph Curry.
They've gotten a lot of breaks in this 3-year run, but I'll give credit to Kerr, of course, but he's had a lot of breaks and they've gotten fortunate. And like you said, healthy. The management deserves credit. Second round draft picks such as Green and stuff of that nature. But Kerr has had a solid impact in that he took a team that was winning 45, 50 games a year and turned it into a juggernaut by, I think, his influence on the offensive end. This was always a good, solid defensive team.
Yeah, I always thought this. Obviously, Mark Jackson did a great job with this team, and they had successful seasons. But like you said, Kerr took them to another level, and offensively, they really jumped. And he kind of was more accepting of them, just kind of like launching threes, because he realized how great of shooter Steph Curry and Klay Thompson are, and how that could benefit the team. And if he lets these guys loose, that they could just be lethal. And also, I think the front office did a great job. Obviously, getting Steph Curry on that great deal that he's on because of the injuries, they were able to sign him long-term on a steal. So that kind of opens up some flexibility when you're able to bring in a player like Andre Iguodala, who, is in a bench role now, and then they're able to bring in a player like Kevin Durant this year. So it just seems like they're clicking on all cylinders on that team. Obviously, they probably have arguably the most talented team in the NBA, probably a top 5, top 10 coach in the NBA, and a top 5 front office. So I think, when you have those things, and they don't really have any off-the-court issues. The organization is ran well. There's not really a whole bunch of drama. Obviously, Draymond Green gets in trouble here and there, kicking somebody in the nuts, but nothing too crazy that's going to hold them back. So I think a lot of teams are looking to what the Warriors have done this year in the last 3 years, and they're trying to copy that. Obviously, you see in the league the three-point shooting percentages through the roof. A lot of teams are shooting a ton more from three. And if 4 out of 5 of your players can't shoot threes, you're in trouble, it seems like nowadays.
Yeah, obviously, definitely had an impact on the rest of the association, and a lot of credit to, like you said, to the front office. You got to give some credit to Steve, but also just the personnel and what they've been able to do and how they've been able to do it in a short period of time, and took the NBA by storm. A lot of old school players and old school fans are upset about how it's taken place, and what I say to those people is put a hand up, box out, and be quiet.
Well, and also I want to say it's like the job they've done with Draymond Green. You mentioned he was a second-round pick, and he's really developed into one of the best power forwards in the league, and he has that ability to be, a defensive type of player of the year type player, as well as an offensive playmaker, and kind of, introducing smaller guys at that 4 position. We know Draymond is undersized, and usually when you have that undersized guy, they're huge and they're banging in the post. But I mean, Draymond can handle his own, but he's not known as like, somebody who's going to bang around the post, and he's kind of opened up things for other players. Even you see players around the league going small. That small ball lineup is a more popular thing, and I think a lot of that has to do with the Warriors. I look at the Nets, and they've gone with Rondae Hollis-Jefferson at the 4, and I think that's been a great move for Rondae and a great move for the Nets, and it kind of opens up things defensively and offensively, gives you some more versatility.
It's a model that you see that people have to adjust to them. It's a model that we're going to see more frequently, and even we just mentioned about the Cavs and how small they are. We know what's happened to the center in basketball. There are some still solid centers out there, but up until 2012, up 2013, before this wave, and there have been, teams that have, we know what the Suns were with Steve Nash and D'Antoni, but I think over the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen the expansion towards small ball and how it's impacted basketball across the country.
Exactly. And you mean the amount of success the Warriors have had have kind of allowed people to accept it more? We talked about the Suns, but the Suns never won a championship or even got to the championship. So the Warriors able to get to a championship, win a championship, and just having this continued success, I think makes it more acceptable to play this type of basketball.
Yes, sir.
So, and it's kind of funny because the Warriors are almost not really being talked about right now. Everyone's kind of worried, talking about the Cavs, even talking about the Spurs a little bit, and the Warriors have quietly found their rhythm. They picked it up defensively. I saw somebody mention, because they had their cold stretches offensively, it made them focus more in defensively. Then they're going to get back one of the best players in the NBA in Kevin Durant, so their scoring is already going to go up. Obviously, Kevin Durant's had a great season defensively too, so right now, the Warriors are my favorites going into the postseason. If I had to pick somebody today to win a championship, and I know Kevin Durant's going to be back, which he's supposed to be back into about 7 to 10 days, I would probably go with the Warriors as my pick right now with a healthy Kevin Durant.
Yeah, you're not gonna get a big argument out of me. I'm leaning towards them, but I mean it's gonna come down to those two teams. I mean, we spoke about the Cavs struggles early in the show, but I'm gonna hold off on until I see the brackets and stuff. I'm gonna hold off on making some of my picks and who's the title favorite. And
Well, I mean, just for today, I say my
understand.
title favorite is the Warriors. Obviously, things cannot change between now and then, and I'll give my final picks, on our playoff prediction episode. But for now, I'm feeling pretty confident what they can do.
Yeah, and it's a 60-14 club, and at the beginning of the year, I thought they'd be 68-14. I think they're going to drop a couple over the last 8, and
They're going to get some extra games of rest for Curry and Clay. And I wouldn't be surprised if you saw the Cavs do the same thing because LeBron is taking a beating. He's been a little bit fatigued. We talked about rest a little bit on previous episodes, but we're going to talk about it a little bit more. I saw a tweet earlier today. Thunder and Rockets, lowest rated NBA game ever on broadcast TV, a 0.9. 4 of the 8 lowest rated have come in the past month. So viewage-wise, and I can tell you these games, is Thunder versus Rockets, Cavs versus Clippers. I think that was the game where they didn't play LeBron and Kyrie. Clippers and Bulls and Celtics. Obviously, the Bulls have been kind of a letdown, so a lot of people probably didn't tune into them. But do you think a rest has an issue to do with this viewage, or is it just the value of the regular season being down, or it's not a concern at all?
People are a little upset, I think, and throughout March Madness, I usually get all my friends that text me and talk to me. The NBA product sucks. They're soft. Blah blah blah. Rest. This is where the March Madness is really at. And I get the whole argument of March Madness in college basketball is definitely a great watch around this time of year. Don't get me wrong. I love to watch the NBA as well. Could be a couple reasons. Competing with college basketball, and also there's some people upset about the rest thing, and and there have been people busy. I don't know. It's a tough thing to pinpoint why the ratings are down and why people aren't tuned in. The NFL ratings took a shot at some point this year as well. It's a tough thing to understand.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, I think, like you said, March Madness really had some great matchups this year. It's a big draft class, so a lot of NBA prospects. I know some people are probably watching March Madness instead of NBA games because they're looking at the prospects. Also, I think, like you said, people are pissed off about the rest. I mean, and like we've said in the past, I can see both sides of rest, why a fan might be upset, but I can understand why a team might rest a player so he can be more successful down the road and in the postseason. So that makes sense. And also, you always hear people complaining, oh, the NBA is not competitive, blah, blah, blah. And I think also you look at a team like the Bulls on there. The Bulls have just been a complete disappointment this year. Dwayne Wade's been out. Rondo hasn't played well. He's played better lately, but that whole team hasn't really impressed people. So I think that could be some of the issue. And then the primetime matchups just not being great. Thunder and Rockets, that was a blowout early. The Cavs and Clippers, we mentioned, the Cavs sat a couple players. So it sucks when they sit in the primetime games, but, if they're going to sit players, they're going to sit them. There's not really much I think they can do about it.
Yeah, it's been a major topic of discussion, obviously, the rest. And a lot of people have come out and said their piece on it and had their opinions on it.
I think Patrick Beverley said this week that it was like disrespectful to the league to rest.
Yeah, and then Silver's come out and said some things on it. I think you'll get the Warriors at full strength tonight. I don't think anyone's going to sit out against the Spurs. I think they want to create some separation.
2.5 games. They win tonight. 3.5 games. That's a pretty big jump. And that's what they're looking for.
100%.
But talking about players who aren't really getting rested, let's talk about Rookie of the Year. Obviously, this race was pretty much locked up for the first half of the season. Joel Embiid had this on lock, but we know Embiid went down. He had to get surgery on his left knee, and he hasn't played, I think, since January or February. So he's only played 31 games this year, which is probably going to take him out of the race. So other than that, this rookie class hasn't been that impressive. But the first two names that come to mind, Dario Saric and Malcolm Brogdon. Who's your pick? Who do you like for Rookie of the Year? Do you still want to see Embiid win, or it doesn't really matter?
I would take Dario Saric is my pick for Rookie of the Year. I just don't think Embiid's played enough games, and I think I would give it to Saric at this point. No, Malcolm Brogdon has had some nice moments with the Bucks. This has never been an award for whose team's better.
Yeah, it
That
really doesn't matter.
one of those awards that has nothing to do with the success of the team that person is on. That's why I would think I would lean towards Saric at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, he's picked up the slack. Actually, one of my writers, Mark Contave, just wrote an article about Saric being the favorite to win Rookie of the Year because he believes, when Embiid went out, Saric's game has jumped. I think he went from like a 10-point scorer a game to almost 17. His rebounds went up as well. And you can kind of see when you watch the Sixers that his role has picked up a lot. And going forward, he's definitely a nice player for that team. And I said this to you before. He's just like a basketball player type player that he's out there and he's going to help you win games in a whole bunch of different ways. He's improving as a shooter. He moves without the ball really well for a big. He drives to the rim. He has a pretty good pump fake as well. And you can tell he wants to win games. So I think going forward, Sixers should be really happy with him as a fan. And he would be if I had a vote, I would pick him for Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, no, I definitely think so too. And he's definitely made them more appealing. I think now that we don't know what Simmons is going to be, but he'll be back next year, and that'll make that group a young core and appealing as long as they can stay healthy.
Yeah, and the nice thing about Sark is I think he has some versatility to him, so he can kind of fit in a couple different roles. Obviously, I think power forward is the right place for him, but he can facilitate a little bit. He's a pretty good passer, and he can score. He can play defense. He moves around well. So, I mean, I like that core going forward. You have Embiid, Saric, Simmons. So TJ McConnell's a solid backup point guard probably in the NBA. Then they're going to have one of these high picks this year, and they're probably going to get one of these star guards. So Sixers are definitely in the right direction. What do you think about this draft class overall? It hasn't been super impressive. It doesn't look like there's going to be a lot of superstars from this class.
Well, it's definitely deep. I think it's definitely has some potential to be deep. It's always
about the draft coming up, the draft that we had just had.
Oh, the Simmons draft.
No, the Simmons draft, the one with Sark and Brogdon. Oh, actually, Sark wasn't in this one. Brogdon, Chris,
Sark was the year before. Yeah. No, I think guys I think we had high hope. I mean, it's 1 year in, so it's hard to.
And I think one of the issues is some of these players that have a lot of potential, we haven't really got to see a full 82 games of like 30 minutes or so. You're looking at someone like Jaylen Brown, who's obviously a young player. I think some of these guys are actually really young, so there is potential, but just I don't know how long it's going to take to develop.
Ingram,
Jamal Murray, I think, is another nice piece. Even Marquise Chris, Dragan Bender missed majority of the season. I'll backtrack on my statement a little bit. I just think that we won't see a ton from this draft class for a year or two.
Yep.
Because I think a lot of these guys are really raw and young, but they do have potential a couple of years down the road.
Yeah, I mean, as far as guys like, middle of the guys like these 12, 13, 14, 15, doesn't look like Taurean Prince and Valentine and Hernan Gomez and Wade Baldwin. I think it definitely does. It's definitely not that deep, but from these top guys, it's going to definitely take some time. I think a little longer than maybe expected. But this upcoming draft, this 2017, I think is definitely going to be deeper.
Yeah, I think this one's going to be deeper in the fact that it also has more star power. I've seen a couple NBA draft guys tweet out, you have a top 5 pick, you're pretty much guaranteed a star in this draft. Obviously, we've heard that a few times and it hasn't come true, but it looks like there's a lot of talent at the top in this draft and throughout the draft.
Yeah, no, it definitely has that kind of potential to be that deadly of a draft. It's you could see some serious tanking in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, and definitely because some of these teams, it also just makes sense, and it's not competitive enough in the NBA that where an 8 seed is really going to upset a 1 seed. We'll see it once maybe every 10, 15 years, but it's not a common thing. We are not going into the playoffs and thinking, Miami's going to has a good chance to upset Boston. We're not thinking, number 7 Indiana is going to upset Cleveland, and we're definitely not thinking Portland or Denver is going to upset Golden State. Maybe in some of those 6-3, those 4-5s, we could maybe see some upsets, but they're not even quite as much upsets. So I think that has a lot to do with it too in the NBA. There's a big gap from if you're a contender or if you're a playoff team.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
And trust me, I know obviously being a Nets fan, the Nets made the playoffs a few seasons in a row when they first came to Brooklyn, but I obviously knew every year that best case scenario was probably the second round. And maybe the year they had Garnett and Pierce Eastern Conference Final was a hope, but it still, was highly unlikely because you need to just have so many things go right and just have a great team all around to really get to that contender level.
Now, let me ask you this question. I want to ask you a couple questions before the end of the show. One, I heard something today on the radio, and I needed to run it by you because it's to me, it seems like such an outrageous thought. If LeBron James played on this Brooklyn Nets team, would they be a contender?
It's hard to say that because you'd have to take into the fact that LeBron joins a team, you're automatically getting veterans that wouldn't necessarily come to your team. You know, you're going to get players who are going to sign for small deals just to help you out. Obviously, like they picked up Darren Williams, Andrew Bogut, Richard Jefferson type players.
It's kind of like when Adam Sandler does a movie, you know that
he brings his friends.
He's going to bring 4 or 5 people, well, maybe more than that, but that are always going to be in his cast. So when LeBron James plays in a team, he's got his cast of characters. And for some reason, James Jones always comes to mind.
Yeah, James Jones has been I think to the finals like a couple straight years with LeBron, if not all 6. So it's kind of crazy stuff. But I mean, I think this Nets team at the end of the season has been playing a lot better than the beginning of the year. But I don't know if they'd be able to really compete. It's tough to say because they just don't really have many veterans on the team. Obviously, Jeremy Lin, LeBron James, and Brook Lopez would make a pretty nice trio. And then you have some energy and some youth and some defense, but like maybe this would probably be a team that would start the season and maybe win like 50 games with LeBron, and maybe by the end of the year they might be able to contend. But I don't know. They would contend in the East maybe, but in the West I don't know if they contend with LeBron. Same thing if you threw him on a few teams, I don't know if he could just instantly transform them into contenders. It's not as easy as people make it seem. Like they think, oh, you get LeBron, it's like guaranteed playoffs. Like most of the time he at least has some pretty good players around him. Even when he was first in Cleveland, I know those rosters weren't great, but it's not like they were all atrocious trash.
It's pretty crazy how when he first left Cleveland, though, what happened to their team.
Yeah, no, that is pretty. I mean, I also think that would happen if he left Cleveland right now. I think they'd be a playoff team. I don't think they'd be a contender. They'd be like a lower playoff seed.
Yeah.
Because he brings, not only his intangibles of being, who he is, it's just like he brings players, he brings attention. Players just play better when they play with LeBron, and he obviously sets them up in situation, and he kind of helps them understand their role better, I think, too, which is underestimated like impact that he has. He might sit down with a guy and be like, we need you to do this for us to be a championship, or like, I'm going to put you, this position is the best for you to have success. And I think that's something that he helps do as well. Yes. What do you think? If he would join the Nets, what do you think would happen?
I think they'd be in the top 4, top 5. I'm not sure if they would win a championship or contend for a title, but I definitely think they would be, just because the production at level, I think of Lopez and Lin.
I think Lopez and LeBron would get some craziness out of Lopez. I think you'd see like a different type of player.
I think they'd be a top 4, but enough with the hypotheticals.
Hypotheticals.
So Warriors Spurs tonight. Who do you got?
I wish I had like the rosters, like the active lineups right now, so I could tell you if somebody's going to sit or not. If I'm saying nobody's sitting, they both have been playing pretty well. The Spurs, I think, are they're about to have another season where they held their opponents under 100 points a game, which is incredibly difficult in the NBA nowadays. But give me the Warriors. I think, like, for some reason, I just feel like they have some edge right now. Their defense seems right. Steph's starting to find his rhythm. Clay's starting to find his rhythm. One of those guys probably gets hot, and I think the Warriors take it. What about you?
Hard for me to pick against Golden State. So I'll pick the Warriors. Now I'm not going to pick against them. It's going to be a tough game, tight game. It's 9:30, which I'm a little upset about. I wanted to be on a little earlier, but they got the ESPN, so they got to knock it back to 9.
Accommodate the fans.
Yeah. And then my last question for you is: does Russell Westbrook record a triple-double in Orlando tonight? And
I feel like this is like probably a lock. This is like, I was looking at the FanDuel things today, and I was like, do I want to play Russ? He's $13K though. He'll probably get a triple-double, and I could probably get it in the third quarter. So I don't know if he'll play like a ton of minutes to pick up the fantasy points.
Yeah. Why? Because the matchup against Orlando. Right.
Yeah, Orlando is like, sometimes Orlando plays well. Sometimes they're like a terrible team. So you don't know what you're going to get from them. But I think obviously OKC should pick up the W.
Yeah, and that's OKC trying to get that. I think they might clinch a playoff spot tonight if they win. I'm not 100% sure, but I know the Clippers just clinched a spot.
Yeah, no, I think if they do win, probably that it would probably clinch them a spot. The Clippers just
that and a loss from somebody else, but
and they're a game behind the Clippers right now for that number 5 spot. And I think that is important in a couple aspects, probably for the matchup in the first round and also in the matchup in the sense of the MVP race. Every seed Westbrook is higher, the more likely he is to win.
And amazingly enough, they're not dead in the top 4 spot. They're only – I know it's a long shot, but
it could happen. Gordon Hayward just got hurt for the Jazz. I know it's not a serious injury, but they could kind of go the safe route and rest him a few games, so they're worried about.
I know they don't get that head-to-head with OKC, but I looked at the schedules, and it looks like the Jazz get the Spurs twice and the Warriors once, and the Portland who's fighting for a spot a couple of times. So it's not.
And it's funny to all the people that say, the regular season doesn't matter, they don't care as much. All those games that you say don't really matter are starting to matter now. That game that you lost by 2 points, or you lost on a buzzer beater, or you just had a shitty last 4 minutes of the game, that game is costing you a playoff seed right now, possibly, and possibly a better matchup in the first round, which matchups we know mean a lot, especially when you're going to face this team for possibly 7 games.
Yeah, it's down to the nitty-gritty. We're almost there, man. The marathon is almost over, and we're almost ready for our second season here.
I'm really excited for the postseason. I just feel like there's going to be some really good matchups. Last year I think wasn't amazing. The year before that was really good, but last year I know a lot of people complained, but the finals and kind of made up for it. This year I think we could see some nice matchups throughout the postseason. We could see some classic series.
Yeah, it's shaping up to be pretty crazy, and I know it's what a lot of people are complaining about and expecting is, oh, we're just going to see the Warriors and Cavs again. But I think we're in for a treat. I think there's going to be some good basketball ahead, and definitely some things that are going to shake things up a little bit.
I would say it's more likely than the last 2 seasons combined that we would see a different matchup in the finals, just because one injury, one bad stretch for either the Cavs or Warriors, there's a team out there that can knock them off. Last year, we weren't so sure that a team could even knock off the Cavs. And the Warriors were 1 quarter away from getting knocked out of the postseason and sent home in the Western Conference Finals. Other than a complete, letdown by the OKC, it would be OKC versus Cavs in the finals last year. And then the whole NBA landscape would be some type of different shit.
Yeah, no, it definitely would. You're right about that.
I think it's easy to say that if the OKC had gone to the championship or won a championship, Kevin Durant would still be there.
Very true. And how I feel about this one. Obviously there was a lot of discussion about this, but at the end of the day, if they had just defeated the Warriors and even got there, or if the Warriors had won, I also believe that too. If the Warriors had won, I don't think winning 2 in a row, you're going to add anybody. That would have been kind of ridiculous. But
yeah, I don't think they would have added him, but I think Durant could have possibly still left for another location.
Yeah. We'll never know.
Yes, we will never know. But that's enough for this episode. On Saturday, definitely check us out. We'll probably be talking some MVP race, some rankings. So keep an eye out for that and enjoy tonight's games, and we'll talk to you later this week.
All right. Take care, guys.